I'd like to thank the gentlelady from New Jersey for her leadership, continued leadership, as she brings those of us of the Congressional Progressive Caucus to the floor to speak on issues of concern for the American people. Let me also thank the gentlelady from Oregon for her leadership, and I'm delighted to be a co-sponsor, an original co-sponsor of her very important legislation that is championed by the Congressional Progressive Caucus that is really demanding, calling for high-quality, guaranteed, affordable, and accessible child care for every American family, and a strong child care workforce that is paid a living wage at least $15 an hour and has a voice on their job. I have alongside of me just a picture of children that may be any child here in America, happy and smiling. And Mr. Speaker, that's why we're standing on the floor of the House today. Because as Americans, as members of the United States Congress, it is our responsibility to be able to provide for the happiness and smiling of our children. And so I tell a story as I begin my remarks on the importance of this special order and the importance of child care. Just a few years ago in my area in Houston, parents got a call that no parent wants to receive. These were parents of little children, and they got a call to come rushing to their daycare center. They were rushing because their daycare center was on fire. And the tragedy is a young woman who had this business, whose family gave her this business so that she could have something to do, an income, had stepped away and went to a store and left little children under the age of 5 alone by themselves while a boiling pot of some form of food was on the stove. What happened was, obviously, that pot caught fire and babies lost their lives. Babies who could not move or help each other. She came rushing back with great remorse and emotion, but those babies were gone. And that is the story of child care, Mr. Speaker. It is so very important that every child has the potential for greatness, and that is why child care is so important. In today's economy, the need for child care is a reality for the vast majority of families, but most working parents can't afford it. Child care, even while child care teachers are not even being paid enough. Child care teachers are struggling themselves and can't provide for their own children. Low wages and a lack of benefits lead in the high turnover. In the instance of child care centers across America, many of them are unregulated. Additionally, parents are struggling. On average, center-based child care for 2 children can cost more than rent or mortgage in every state. No one who works hard should have the downside as they care for others' children to be able to not be able to care for theirs. In 2011, 49% of children ages 0 to 4 with employed mothers were primarily cared for by a relative, their father, grandparents, sibling, other relative, or mother, primarily because they could not afford other sources. Center-based care was 26%, grandparents 21%, other relatives 6%. Over 8 million children live in a single-parent household. 76% of these single-parents households were employed. 67% of women in the workforce had a child under the age of 6. 30% of women work at night and have a child under the age of 5. And 29% of children in need of child care have multiple arrangements for child care that can include relatives or skilled child care services. 16% of children in need of child care services live in poverty. The high cost of child care, the cost of full-time infant care across the United States in 2012 ranged from $4,600 to $20,000. Mr. Speaker, that's more sometimes than a part-time worker makes or even a full-time worker makes. That's saying to the American people, to women, that we do not care about your children, to fathers, to grandparents. The cost of full-time care for a 4-year-old ranged from $3,900 to $15,000, and the cost of before and after school programs range from $1,000 or $2,000 to $10,000. It is important, as we stand on the floor today, to make this statement that guaranteed child care is really a necessity. It is a right. And why? Because I remember the Declaration of Independence, though not the Constitution, that talks about the pursuit of happiness. And what more pursuit of happiness to ensure that the children that are pictured here on this poster board have the right and opportunity to quality child care, and not have that very devastating call to call a parent who's doing everything they can to provide for the family to rush away from their job because their babies had died in a raging fire because an unregulated child care provider left to go shopping while a food pot was burning on the stove. Recently, the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services began a Don't Be in the Dark campaign to educate parents about the dangers of placing children in unregulated child care in Texas. The importance of regulated child care becomes unavoidably clear when one considers the fact that 13 children died while in unregulated care last year. In 2006, 18 children died in unregulated care in the state of Texas. In order to prepare to stop deaths like this, we need universal care. We need quality care. We need teachers and workers who love what they're doing as they do, but are paid a livable wage, $15, so they too can provide for their families. Unfortunately, safe and affordable child care is not available as much as it should be in the state of Texas. Many working parents rely on state-subsidized care to meet their needs, but in 2007, the statewide waiting list for subsidized care was 17,000 in January, and it moved to 46,000 in October. And so it is important to note, for example, in Austin, it costs about $43 a day to provide for a full day care for a toddler. However, the state will only pay a small amount. And so this is a very important special order. It is to reinforce the fact that our obligation is to safely secure our children and to include our children in the constitutional rights, if you will, of providing for them the sense of a quality of life that is worthy of them as the future of our nation. I join with my colleagues in speaking about and supporting this resolution, but also I join with them to support the full funding of Head Start. For many times we will see that those who are part of Head Start were in fact very important to their growth and their progress. I also want to include these agencies in my community, Avance, neighborhood centers, and say that if we had the universal access to child care, many faith institutions and others could be part of regulated, certified, clean child care that could be made more reasonable for those working parents who work very odd hours and work into the night and early morning and need the kind of around-the-clock child care that is so necessary. So I want to thank Congresswoman Watson Coleman for her leadership. And again, I leave this podium by saying every child in America is precious. And even as we hear those discussing issues of choice and issues that sometimes women have to make, we know that we love our children. And why don't we, as the children are here, as they are toddlers and infants and growing up, make sure that no child goes longing for love, for food, for resources, and no child goes longing for quality child care. I yield back.
I thank the